The why is we want to impact lostness. The why is we want to love God and love people. The why is we want something for you and not from you. And if all these things are true, then we're going to find different ways to do that. We're going to find different ways to impact lostness. We're going to find different ways to be for people. We're going to find different ways that we can love our community and love God in the process. And so if you're here for that, if you're here because you want to be a part of a church that's willing to go further and do things because we love people, you'll stick around because you won't get married to a concept. You'll get married to the idea of loving people.
That's right.
Welcome to Let's Talk About That, the podcast where we take a deeper dive into Sunday's message and explore any questions you might have. I'm your host, AJ Stevens, joined by lead pastor Chip Parker, and I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you. Whether you're a longtime member of the Orchard or a first-time visitor, Let's Talk About That is your space to explore, reflect, and connect. Join us as we navigate the intricacies of faith, spirituality, and daily life, seeking to understand how the wisdom shared on Sundays can be applied to our modern challenges. So grab a cup of coffee, find a comfortable space, and let's dive in together. This is Let's Talk About That, where the conversation about Sunday's message never stops. Well, we're back, and we actually just recorded about 10 minutes. Well, we didn't record it. We thought we recorded about 10 minutes and then realized it wasn't recording. So we're back again. Let me give you guys...
People will never get to hear the gold that Chris just spun out of him.
Man, Chris literally just solved like 7 existential crises.
I would vote him president right now if I hadn't already early voted.
Yeah, you want to
right in?
We don't have time. We don't have time to go through it all again. So sorry, Chris, but just understand that if you need any kind of life advice, Chris,
absolutely, it was incredible.
It was insane. Now, on to the second thing we're talking about after Chris's life advice. Chip, give me your thoughts on the NIL, because I still want to revisit this because for a couple of reasons. One, it allowed us to take some subtle jabs at Florida State, and I'm here for that. Two, I think there is some wisdom in your suggestion here for how the NIL is unfolding, and I got to take a subtle shot at Billy Napier.
So, number one, no subtle shot at FSU when I say I don't think there's been a more drastic drop-off in win total in primetime college football history.
That falls under the objective fact category.
Yeah, that and it's just wild. And yeah, I think the NIL is a part of it because their team composition is so heavy in transfers who've come in. And you know what? Businessman said one time, I think it was Peter Drucker who said it, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Culture eats strategy. So you're saying they don't have an NIL problem. They have a culture problem.
Well, it doesn't even have to necessarily be a problem. It's just not working.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're throwing everybody in a big melting pot and whatever. Maybe it's not a good scheme fit. I don't know. But what I do know is there was a drastic change, and Jordan Travis was a good quarterback, but he wasn't, Tim Tebow, so he didn't make that big of a difference. I'm looking at Chris as I'm saying this because he's our big FSU fan. I got no reaction there. He's just stoic. He's like,
it's because that was another objective fact.
He's already numb for this season, I think.
Oh yeah.
All right,
so here's my NIL take. I'm fine with the NIL, and I'm fine with the transfer portal. You can't have both.
Okay.
Both equal free agency.
Yeah.
I'm great with the NIL deal. Sign a contract, right? You're playing, the university's making money off of you, sign a contract. But when you sign the contract, you honor the contract.
And the school honors the contract.
And the school honors the contract, right? You can't cut the guy and look, no, both of you are honoring this contract. The only out for the player, the school doesn't get an out. The player gets an out if the head coach leaves or is fired.
Because the school made their decision by firing the head coach.
Yeah. Or if he leaves, they didn't match the money or whatever. And the truth be told, the downside for the university is if the player's terrible, well, you're not, that's on you. He signed a contract, he's staying, you honor it. What if he gets hurt? Well, what you're going to see is schools start to take out insurance on these players just like they do in the major leagues.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So now I am terrible.
Fine.
Like, I show up and I thought I was him. I'm not him, right? I'm not that guy. Do I just got to sit here for 4 years? Because I'm not, so the money...
Sign your contract.
Yeah, that seems kind of... I don't know if I love that. I think you should have one transfer. That's where I'm at. You get one transfer so that you can still go play. I get the money side of it, but I'm also here to play football. You know what I mean?
Any contract you can mutually opt out of.
Right.
Right. If the school's like no, or the player's like no, that he can, that happens in anything.
Don't you think the school would bully a guy they don't want there to opt out of the contract at some point? Or do you think the lawsuits these players are filing against schools?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it gets complicated, but at the same time, going back to the culture thing, you're going to get a reputation if that's the case.
Yeah.
But I am fine with the transfer portal too. Go play where you want to play, go for opportunity, go to a new system, a new coach, whatever. Just don't sign a contract with the school.
Problem with the
that earns
transfer
all the
portal,
money.
transfer portal alone is it's going to go. The reality is it will take us back to the NIL under the table, right? There'll be McDonald's bags in the world where we go.
Well, no, and that's the catch, right? Like this was already all happening. It was just happening under the table, and they were policing themselves and managing themselves. Now that it's in the open, it's the wild, wild west. And the truth is, now you've got to police it. So no, there's no under the table stuff at this point. Like you're cooked if they catch that.
Cooked, brother. Yeah. So,
but to be clear, I'm not saying you get to pick one or the other. I'm saying college football should pick one or the other.
Yeah.
And everybody has to operate under that.
Right. Well, so do you think Florida State's problem is an NIL problem?
I don't know. I mean, because there's other schools that have NIL problems, that spend NIL money.
You know who doesn't?
Who's that?
Dabo Swinney.
I didn't know that.
Refuses to. Well, I actually let me
true.
Walk that back. He is no transfer portal, so he very well could be doing NIL stuff.
Yeah, I have no
on
idea.
The front end, but he's out on the transfer portal.
Yeah, I know that other schools have used the transfer portal in NIL deals. Thinking specifically of the University of Georgia, right? We had Trevor Etienne, guy at the Gators, transfers up there, big NIL deal. Pretty sure they're paying people besides the players, the county sheriff's department, the state agency.
That's in the contract.
So, I'm sure that they're spending that NIL money in a bunch of different places.
Highway patrol.
Yeah.
So Florida State was like an early adopter to the portal. And so teams recognized what Florida State did last year and took a lot of the good players out of the portal that Florida State was trying to get, decided to go somewhere else, more money or whatever.
I'm not buying that.
Okay. Yeah.
Not buying that.
He said, okay.
Not buying that. Florida State had every opportunity. They were using the transfer portal before then.
Yeah. It's just
honestly,
such a unique situation.
It's wild.
And that's just one of the things. I mean, there was a lot of fans that were calling for a lot of coaching positions.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, they went 13-0. You can't fire anybody.
Yeah. I think.
Which, that is actually wild. You're 13-0.
I thought they went 14. I thought they went 13-1.
Oh.
I thought it was 13-1.
Right.
Yeah. Once you guys got absolutely dog walked by Georgia. We're getting a little too personal here. Yeah. 13,
yeah, that's this team.
Yeah,
that's right now. Yeah. That's the team.
Because we love our listeners, even you FSU fans, praying about the Georgia fans. Yeah. We've got a giveaway that is.
Let's segue to the giveaway. That's good. So we're at episode 47 right now, and we've been brainstorming, how would we celebrate 50 episodes? Because I would say it takes a lot of work, Chris, to do what you do every week, to be able to put these together, to be able to make the edits. This isn't just we walk in, we hit the record button, and then it's over and published. Chris sits with the hour conversation that we've already had and polishes it and makes it what it is. And so it doesn't just happen. So we want to celebrate that. We also want to celebrate the fact that this has been impactful for people over the course of the last
dozens of people.
In fact, I was going to tell you this earlier, but I was at ED Tanner's, two guys from our lease this past weekend. They both shot deer. One was a nice buck, the other one was a doe, and they're not from here. They're from Central Florida. They're new lease members, so they were kind of like, I don't know where to go. And I was like, there's a couple guys in town. For convenience sake, let's just run up to ED's and you can kind of see what's going on here. And so we run up to ED's, drop his deer off, gets everything he wants, whatever, and we're leaving. And I see one of the gentlemen from the Live Oak location there, and he's dropping he's actually picking his deer up that he had already dropped off. And so we're chatting, and he was like, man, I just got done listening to y'all's last podcast episode. And I'm like, you know what? That's cool. Like, there's 12 people in the world that listen to this, and you're one of them right here with me. No. But it's just cool to see the impact it has, and that sometimes it hits different places. And so we just want to celebrate those things, and we want to do that with you guys. And so for our 50th episode, we're going to do a giveaway. And we're not going to do a giveaway during that episode. We're going to announce the winner on that episode.
That's right. That's an important detail.
Yeah, go ahead and unpack. Tell them how we're going to go about this.
So you've got 3 weeks between now and our 50th episode, which will air on November 26th, right? And so what's going to happen is every week we post the podcast on social media, and when you like the post, you get an entry for the gift card. When you share the post, you get an entry on the gift card. When you comment your favorite part of the show, you get an entry for the gift card, and you get to do that for 3 episodes. So that is a total of 9 entries. And because 9's a weird number, we're going to give you an extra entry if you go on the Apple Podcast website and go ahead and give us a review. That means write a review, leave your name on it. That means 10 entries. Shout out to Hallie Tillman, who already did it. You're the first entry already. Look at you. So 10 entries for a gift card, giving it away on November 26th.
I hate that there were no Florida State fans left to hear that. We'll have to make that in the post that they all turned us off already. It'll be good. So do that and then enter the giveaway, and we will have a prize that we give away on the 50th episode. We'll reveal that. So
I like it.
It'll be good. It'll be fun. Let's dive into some serious stuff. So
wait, we haven't been serious.
I mean, I was serious, unfortunately. All right. So we just got done with it can be controversial. Let's just call it what it is. It can be controversial for people when they walk in and they see a screen. A lot of our people don't love the screen. They tolerate the screen. And I'm glad they do, because while the screen is not everyone's favorite, this message and this sermon series we do every year is one of the most impactful ones that we do. And we've seen the language linger from year to year to year because of how impactful it is.
Yeah, we have seen the language stick around. It's a good point.
And so this is what we call our vision series. And really,
in case you guys want to know, AJ just air quoted vision for us in the room. He said vision.
I did do that. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like Will Ferrell. I don't know what to do with my hands. But with that, I want you to walk us through that process. So we do this every November, and really this is the unique series of the year where you are out front in all 3 locations the entire month, sharing your heart and which the Lord's laying on your heart for our church. And so I would just love for you to walk through that with our people. How does this process unfold? When do you start thinking about this stuff? How do you know when you've landed somewhere? Walk us through that.
Yeah, I think that for me, the first time that I had to do the Vision series was the year that the church was voting for me to transition into the role of lead pastor and really laying out that vision for where we were going. And it started that year with, I'm going to take the month of October off and just really make sure I've got this down. Take time where I'm not preaching and preparing a sermon every week to hear from the Lord and to go from there. There was a lot of groundwork already done with that first one because, I knew in my heart, what I wanted to see happen in the orchard. I believe that God's the one who put that burden there. I think Pastor Eddie really affirmed that when I just, over the years had shared that with him. But now doing it multiple years, it's been a little bit different, and it's a little bit different because honestly, it's probably very early in the year where I start thinking about the Vision series.
Okay.
I would say no later than Easter.
Okay.
As I'm thinking about that. And it's kind of weird because it's not like I'm thinking of a vision for the church. Because I don't think I've wavered very much on what I believe is the vision that God has burdened me with to lead our church toward, and that's impacting lostness on that regional North Central Florida level.
Yeah, that has been the most consistent burden I've seen from you, to be honest. Like you're going to die on the hill that this region of Florida needs to see themselves as a conglomeration of rural communities, not isolated rural communities. And so, I would echo that. I'd affirm that.
Or even if they don't see it, we need to begin to see it and take advantage of it. But each year it's, okay, what part of that do we need to lean into? Mm-hmm. What is the next step that we need to take to get to where we're going? And how do I articulate that in a way that sticks with people? And, you already mentioned that a lot of that language over the last few years has kind of taken root for us. Mm. That idea of impacting lostness, like impact is like that's us. Like that's part of our core language now. Another one that has really taken root is the idea of spiritual formation. Mm. There we go. Yep. Of being formed spiritually. That has become a core idea for us. And even one of the Vision series that was in between those, I remember we did a series on revival. Mm-hmm. While I don't think we had specific language that came out of that, I do think that there was a raised awareness of the supernatural reality of what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, it's not that the vision has changed, but it's really making it clearer articulating it, talking about the steps that we need to take as we move forward with it. But that doesn't happen in October anymore. It happens early in the year. I really give maybe some of my most focused, dedicated thought time to that in July. I don't preach in the month of July anymore. That's a location pastor month. My family and I, now that Leanne is back teaching in the classroom, we take 2 weeks off together there in July and just time away from work as a family. And one of the things that I've always kind of had in my world is no separation between ministry and life and job and home. And in some ways, I've learned to do that, but really it doesn't bother me to switch from life to work. There is no barrier in my mind with that. Like, I think hopefully people see in me, I am who I am, whether it's Pastor Chip or Coach Chip or Chip. I mean, it's just like, I'm not going to be somebody different. And so being on vacation for 2 weeks doesn't mean I'm not thinking about church stuff. I mean, I am thinking, I'm reading, I'm, really sorting through that. And then by Labor Day, I'm usually pretty zeroed in on where we're going to be going. And the rest of that time is really just kind of narrowing down that language and crafting that language. So for instance, this year, I knew, coming out of the summer, we need to talk about what it looks like for the orchard to grow up. And then, Chris, you were in the room and we were kind of talking about maybe how to articulate this. It wasn't, it was sometime August, September that we started narrowing in on that idea of impact tomorrow, and then lasting impact really, maybe the last 6 weeks to month, we really narrowed down on, that's where we're going this year. Is how do we at the orchard leave a lasting impact? And so anyway, and that's kind of a long answer, but it's not it's not a short, clean process. It, it just kind of happens a little bit over time. And it's not, saying, hey, God, what's the new vision? Like, no, it's the same vision. It's what's the next step to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of having those growing burdens along the way is cool, because I think this one, as we dove into this, it's cool to see how clearly I believe, it's right. Like, we're in that, like, this is the next phase for the orchard. We do need to, like you said, Sunday, time to grow up, time to figure out what it looks like to not just be the cool church anymore, but to be the church that helps people in the spiritual formation process, helps people impact lostness and use some of the previous year's language.
You said the cool church. It absolutely blows my mind that the orchard still gets called the cool church.
Yeah.
When Eddie was our founding pastor, Michael's been our executive pastor, and now I'm the lead pastor. Like, I'm not sure that cool as a verb gets dropped on, or an adjective that gets dropped on us very often.
And you guys are cool, man.
Yeah, I'll live the other side of the pillow.
On the other side of the pillow. I like it. So let's talk about this last week a little bit, because in this conversation, you said to the orchard as a whole, it's time for us to grow up, right? It's time for us to grow up as a church. In your head, without re-preaching the sermon, because it's there, if you want to go listen to it, it's online. What are some of those key components to us doing that as a church? What are some things that stick out to you? Like, man, if we're going to grow up, we need to do this. We need to get this right.
Well, I don't want to re-preach the sermon, and I don't want to preach the next 2 weeks' sermons ahead either. But to me, it really is the biggest thing we have to do is adopt that mind shift of what we are as a church. I said in the message, we're not an infant, brand new, can't take care of ourselves. No, we're sustainable. We're not a toddler taking our first steps. We talked about Sunday just how far the church has come and all that the Lord has done in the church. 8,500 people walking through our doors, 408 being baptized, 3.2 million given to gospel mission, 9 churches planted, 8 churches revitalized. Like, so much has happened. We're not taking those first steps anymore. We're not a kid. And I said this, and this was the one that really hit home for me, just thinking through it. We're not a kid anymore. When you're a kid, right, everything's fun. Everything's easy. Everything, it's not a big deal. And there's a time in early church life when everything's up and to the right. God's just blessing. There's no conflict. There's no struggle. It's fun.
Yeah.
But then when you grow, things get a little more complicated, right? You become a teenager, puberty hits, things are a little bit more awkward, and you're not sure how to, deal with this extra, 1.5 foot of growth that you have, and now your arms and legs don't work as well as they used to, and you're trying to figure out who you're going to be, what you're going to do. and you're still thinking, man, I hope we look cool doing it. I don't think that's who we are anymore. I think we're coming out of that phase. Really, I think we've been in an adolescent phase for a little while. I think, mine and Pastor Eddie's transition was a part of that phase of us figuring out who we are and who we're becoming. And I think it's time for us to take a step to adulthood.
Yeah.
That means responsibility, that we're going to have to take some responsibility. That means doing things that are not just focused on what that thing is going to accomplish in the next 6 months to year, but what are we going to do that's leaving a church for our kids' to come to and be impacted by? What are we doing to reach beyond our four walls into our communities and into more communities so that this region is impacted by the gospel? And so I think shifting away from, hey, we're not who we were in the sense that we've grown up. We haven't changed at our core.
Right.
But we're in a different phase of life now.
Yeah.
And it's time for us to grow up.
Yeah, we're not afraid to have hard conversations. We're not afraid to assume more responsibility. We're not afraid to take on bigger tasks because we know it's going to have an impact, right? Impacting lostness, and we know it's going to help people grow spiritually in the spiritual formation process. So that's what it looks like is for the church as a whole. If you had to, in your head, say, all right, that's cool, this is what we want to do. And I mentioned this Sunday, the group chat syndrome, right? All right, the orchard needs to grow up. I think it's real easy for us to say, man, I really hope the person next to me grows up. I really hope the person next to me gets this figured out so that we can go. What does it look
100%
like?
that's what Katie was thinking.
Yeah, always.
I always say that because she wasn't at church Sundays.
Always. So what does that look like, right? For the individual to not pass it off in the group text. What in your head, I'm a part of the orchard. This is a place I call home. All right, Chip, what is my next step? What are you telling me to do? What does this look like for me?
All right. So again, I'm not going to say too much right now because I feel like it would be rushed to say it right now. What I will say, and I mentioned the message, is what this vision series is pointing to and what we are gearing up for is an initiative that we're going to be starting in January. And that initiative is going to be called Impact Tomorrow. That's why we got the name Lasting Impact from for this series. But Impact Tomorrow is going to be a church-wide initiative that lays out a very specific vision of what we feel like we need to accomplish in relationships and in, let's say, infrastructure, and then the steps that we as individuals can take to help us accomplish that as a location, and then our locations for the church as a whole. So we are going to walk through that, and there's going to be some very specific steps that we're going to be asking you to take. And one of the things that we have done, Michael and I have spent a lot of time working on this since early this summer, like before the summer started, we were working on this. What are those specific steps that we all need to go through at the orchard? How can we outline those so that a person who attends the church can identify easily where they are and what the next step they need to take is?
Yeah.
Because to answer your question very simply, not very effectively, but simply, is that what we need to grow up is we need everybody to start taking their next step.
Yeah. Good. I like it. You mentioned in your sermon growing deeper and wider, right? Like we want to grow deeper as a church, wider as a church. And so until we lay out the next steps, and we're going to get to that in January, like you said, right now, what can I do? What can I do to grow deeper and wider right now as an individual to prepare myself for what I'm going to be told in January?
So let's talk about deep and wide for a minute. I think deep and wide, I have to admit, comes from a book written by controversial pastor Andy Stanley.
Is it crazy to hear him called controversial?
It is. And
he just was early on in my figuring out of Christianity. Yeah. He was so influential. And it was like, man, Andy's the man.
He's still incredibly influential.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, I'm not sure how much his theology has changed. There are some reports that his theology in a few areas have changed, but not on the Word of God, of salvation in Christ alone, Jesus is the Son of God, not stuff like that. But even at the end of the day, I think Andy's biggest issue for a lot of people who are more conservative than him is he's not talking to them when he preaches.
100%.
Andy is talking to the non-believer skeptic 10 out of 10 times.
Right.
And he's kind of like the Howard Stern of Christian pastors. He likes to say things in a shocking, let me get your attention so you'll lean in, controversial way. And then when you listen to him, it's like, oh, that's not that controversial. And a great example of that is his statement, we have to unhitch from the Old Testament.
Right.
Man, that blew up a while back. And everybody's like, the Old Testament, we can't let go of the Old Testament. It's part of the Bible, yada, yada.
Right.
Well, he wrote an entire book explaining what he meant by that, called Irresistible. And to be honest, it is some of the most solid theology of Old Testament and New Testament hermeneutics that I've ever read. And not for one second does he say we do away with the Old Testament. What he's saying is we need to learn to live in the New Testament and live under the New Covenant, because we are not bound by the Old Covenant anymore. We all agree with that. But he said it in such a way to rile people up so that they would lean in.
Check.
So that's how he does things. But this book he wrote, Deep and Wide, was before that. Mm-hmm. And in Deep and Wide, he laid out really kind of how he built and planted the church. He pastors North Point Community Church in Atlanta area. Actually, I would recommend everybody picking up the book for the first couple of chapters, because the first couple of chapters is the story of him planting that church. And it involves his relationship with his father, because a lot of people have often wondered about what happened there. It involves his relationship with Louis Giglio, who was one of his best friends growing up, who also planted a church in Atlanta. So it's really just fascinating to hear some of the history of that. But I chose to say Deep and Wide very intentionally, because I, honest to goodness, do not remember anything in that book outside of the story of the church being planted. But I do remember the concept, Deep and Wide. And the concept is that we want to have deeper roots. Mm-hmm. In his book, those deeper roots really were primarily focused on deep community. And I think that's definitely a part of it. But AJ, and maybe if you're listening to this, as well, deep community, authenticity, doing life together, those are buzzwords that make my skin crawl, because I'm not sure community and fellowship was ever a purpose of the church. They're a byproduct of what happens when we are the church and we live as the church. Yeah. But I don't disagree that we need a deeper community. And that's part of what I mean when I say deeper. But primarily for us at the Orchard, when I say deeper, I mean, I want us to have deeper spiritual roots. I want us to have a deeper relationship with God primarily. I want us to not shy away from theology and doctrine, because in the world that we're living in and as it is becoming, we need to have a solid foundation for what we believe and why we believe. And we need to be able to nuance positions in a very clever way, in a very winsome way. We need to be able to be nuanced where we need to be nuanced. And when I look at people, on Facebook posting, all of these things on Facebook, and I'll just throw it out there, right? The election is coming up tomorrow as we record this. The election is today as you're listening to this, maybe. And I've seen several people post, we need to bring God back to America. Homie, he ain't never left. God is omnipresent. He is in the highest heights and in the lowest depths, and God is just as present in America today as he was when we were a, quote, Christian nation, but we treated women and minorities like crap. Yeah. And he's also God of a Muslim theocracy in the Middle East and in control over there just as much as is here. That's terrible theology that is uninformed and shallow. I want us deeper. Yeah. I want us to say, nope, I have issues with the direction our country is headed, and I believe we need to correct those issues, but I'm going to be clear and winsome and nuanced in how I talk about that, not making it one vote is for Jesus and one vote is for the devil. Yeah. Nobody, like that's not what we're talking about. Even if you believe that to be the case, right, you have to know that it's saying that's just theologically inaccurate. Yeah. So we need to have deeper roots, and then we need to have a wider impact, a wider influence. Far too often, churches are concerned about what happens inside of their four walls. Far too often, churches make decisions based on the people who are already there. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think Pastor Eddie put in our DNA early that makes the Orchard a different type of church than many other churches is that we think about people who aren't here yet. We make decisions for the sake of people who aren't here yet. And as we grow up as a church, there is going to be a temptation to start looking inward.
Yeah.
And to limit that impact and to make decisions on what's going to make the most people who call the Orchard home happy. There are people that I love at the Orchard, dear friends, people who are there every time I pick up the phone to call and say, hey, I need something. They're there. And they would say, Pastor, wouldn't it be great if we did? And I'll say, yeah, no. You know, why? Because I get it. You would love that. But I'm the one to think about the people who aren't here yet. And so I want us to make sure that we keep that wide impact, that wide influence, that our communities are better because there's an Orchard there. And that when somebody thinks about faith, when somebody thinks about serving the community, when somebody thinks about helping those who are struggling, that inside of this region that we call North Central Florida, that one of the first names that pops in their mind is the Orchard. Yeah. Because they know that we are a safe place and they know that we're a solid place. Yeah. And so that's what I mean when I say deeper and wider. I want us to have deeper roots and I want us to have a wider impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said Sunday, an organization does not do that, right? The people that make up the organization are the pulse and the heartbeat behind what that organization looks like and does. And so, and circle all the way back to the group chat syndrome, this is why it's important for you, the individual, to grow deeper and wider, because we are a collection of individuals that make up this organization, right? That make up the Orchard. And so we don't want to pass this off. In fact, when I think about this conversation, and you're a baseball coach, right? And you played baseball, so you understand this analogy. I'm thinking of the kid that you're like, man, that kid may not have the prettiest swing. That kid may not have the best glove. His arm's okay. But that kid gives it everything he's got every time he's on the field. I want 9 of him. If you give me 9 of him, we're going to go be world beaters. And we're going to storm hell with a water pistol, right? I don't need you to be the most talented. I don't need you to be the most articulate. I need you to run after Jesus relentlessly. And I think the rest of this stuff starts to take care of itself.
I think part of why I love baseball is that it is such a dichotomy of a team sport and an individual sport. Like it's both, right? You're a team, you win or lose as a team, but so much of that game comes down to an individual battle, right? I think for me, the better analogy is when I coach football.
Yeah.
Because football is, there's certain guys who get the headlines. There's certain guys who sign the big contracts. And then that's not always the guy that's winning the game for you.
Right.
You know, it is literally that team. And yes, you as an individual have to win your battle, because if you lose your battle, then the whole thing collapses.
Yeah.
Whether you blow it on defense and it's a broken coverage, or whether you miss an assignment blocking and there's a free backer coming at your running back in the backfield, like you can mess it up for everybody, but you can't win it on your own.
Right.
And I think in a lot of ways, that's kind of what church is there are no heroes in the church that are going to win this for everybody. Right. And that's pastors included. That's me. That's you. Like, I'm not on video this month because I think if everybody sees me, it's going to help the Orchard go deep and wide.
Right.
I'm doing it because as the lead pastor, I feel like I have a responsibility to our flock to communicate where I believe the Lord is leading us, and that I want you to hear that from me. I don't think that means that I am the one who's going to win the game for the Orchard.
Right.
I don't think our location pastors are the guys who are going to win the game for the Orchard. I don't think there's any one person who is going to do that. However, one person can do a lot more damage to the team than they can win it for the team.
Right.
Whether that be through there's a word we don't use a lot, through their testimony, really saying, oh, well, you know, that church must be blank because that person was a hypocrite, liar, whatever. We can give the church a black eye. We can give Jesus a black eye through the way that we live. But more specifically, what I'm thinking is when one person doesn't step up to do their job, that doesn't just impact them, that impacts everybody around them, right? That means that maybe somebody else is stepping in to do their job who God would be using in another way, but they feel like they can't because they have to do blank, right? And I'll give you a great example for that. Let's talk about kids ministry. Because in kids ministry on Sunday, it is a very thin line between a calling and an obligation, right? We have to have kids ministry at the Orchard on Sunday mornings because we want parents to be able to focus in the church and we want kids to get something that is on their level that they can understand and internalize. Now, here's the thing. We've got a lot of people who serve in kids ministry because they know that it has to happen.
Right.
And nobody else has signed up. And I love my church, so I'll sign up.
Right.
Now, we have a few people who serve in kids ministry across our locations who are tell you they are called
Life-giving for them.
to kids ministry.
Yeah.
Right? Now, here's the thing. I believe that if God has given it to us, then he's equipped us for it.
Right.
I believe there's other people that God has called to kids ministry, and maybe they aren't serving in kids ministry
yet
because they haven't leaned into that calling. They haven't even searched out that calling. They haven't prayed and said, God, make it clear to me. And so because they aren't stepping up, now somebody who's not called to kids ministry is obligated to kids ministry, and it's draining the life out of them, and it's keeping them from positively stepping into their calling, which may move the needle somewhere else further down the road.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I mean when I say there's not one hero that's going to win the game.
Right.
But it hurts all of us when one person's not doing their, quote, job.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why it's so important, like you say, AJ, for all of us to step up and take our next step so that we as a church can grow up and move forward.
Yeah. I think that's so true. I think of it in that sense. And I also think in a spiritual formation sense, this is why it matters, right? And this is one, let me say this. This is one of the reasons why it matters, because for a lot of our people, and I explicitly mentioned this Sunday, for a lot of our people, they're not willing to grow deeper because it means giving up sin. And they're not willing to grow deeper because it means giving up margin. And they're okay with not growing deeper because they like that sin. And they're okay with not giving up margin because they like their lifestyle. And when I'm looking at them and I'm looking at myself and I'm looking at my wife and my own family in many ways, I'm saying there are things that we have to check ourselves on if they're keeping us from growing deeper. And there are things that we're going to have to give up. And there are things that we're going to have to say, this is not okay to compromise on anymore. It's sin. I need to let it go.
Yeah.
It's sin and I need to get rid of it. I don't care what this friend group is doing anymore. I don't care what culture says is okay. If I'm going to grow deeper, I need to give this thing up.
Well, what's funny to me is we were just talking about wider, and you said, man, you got to give that up and grow deeper. And I think what you just did is you showed that these two things are interconnected.
Absolutely.
We can't grow wide in a healthy manner unless we grow deep. And if we're truly growing deep and not just pretending to grow deep and making ourselves feel good and growing self-righteous,
Yeah.
but truly growing deep in a relationship with Jesus, it's going to push us to be wider.
100%.
And so these two things are linked together. And you're exactly right. The way that we're going to get wider is by going deeper.
Yeah.
And the way that, and what happens when we go deeper is we're going to grow wider. But what you're going to hear me talk about, and might be a conversation to have, you're going to hear us talk about wide just as much, or maybe even more so than we talk about deep, because we know the natural inclination of church people is in, not out.
Right.
Right? It's kind of like
always.
Nobody has to tell me, hey, Chip, it's probably good for you to eat something.
Right.
You really need to eat something, Chip. It's not healthy for you not to eat. That's not a conversation I have a lot. The conversation I have a lot is, hey, maybe you need to push back from the table a little bit there, big guy. Maybe a little bit too much. So it's not that overeating is more dangerous than undereating. As a matter of fact, the opposite's true. You will starve to death if you don't eat.
Yeah.
But it's that our natural inclination is to eat something.
We have a tendency.
That's right. And so that we're not saying that wider is more important than deeper. We're saying that our tendency is to shy away from the wider.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I think it's good. I'm excited to see how a church that takes seriously growing deeper has the implications and what the implications are for growing wider. I think absolutely they're connected. And I'm excited to see that. Chris, did you put here in the show notes the biggest takeaway from Sunday, or was that you?
Yes.
Chip? Okay, so let me ask, or tell me what the biggest takeaway was for you as you listen to this conversation.
Yeah, so I was in Brantford, and that's where Chip was live, you could say, without the video.
That was where the 5'9", not the 6'2".
Wait, let me say this. You were looking like a whole stud on that screen, brother. I got text messages, and
I've been pushing away from the table.
I love it.
Just throwing that out there.
I love it.
Away from the table.
That's phenomenal.
Some may have said, I didn't know if that was you or AI.
Oh, wow.
And that was weird.
Interesting.
Yeah, she goes, we prayed, and then I looked up, and you were there. And I was pretty sure that you weren't there. And I was like, is this AI? And in my head, I'm thinking, do you know what AI is? But no, it was not AI. It was me.
It was a whole stud muffin. All right.
Oh,
Chris, tell us your biggest takeaway.
My biggest takeaway was a quote that you said, the what we do could change, but the why will never.
yeah.
Never will.
I've said that for a while now. And so here's what I would love. AJ, why don't you unpack that for us? Because it's something I've said for a while now, and maybe it's starting to catch on.
Yeah, if you're so the heart behind this is as an attractional church, and I'll say that, and I'll also say that if you have air
Because
conditioning,
we have air conditioning.
that's Chip's favorite line on the heels of that. The point being, we are an attractional church, air quotes, but Chip's point is, if you have air conditioning, you're an attractional church because you're doing something to attract people and make them comfortable, which I think is a phenomenal point, by the way. But because we are an attractional church, often we do things that other churches don't do, and we do things that people enjoy, right? And so we're going to do things that other traditional churches in town don't do. And at its core for people, I think that is appealing, and they're like, man, this is refreshing in a way, and I would rather do something that nobody's doing, and this is a nice change of pace. And one of the things we're really careful of as we do new things is to make sure people know the what is going to change. We're going to try all kinds of new things, and there's a good chance you fall in love with one of the things that we do, and we're telling you be very careful falling in love with one of the whats that we do, because there's a good chance we're going to shuffle the deck again, and we're going to have a new what, just like the what that you walked into, and you may not like the second what like you loved the first what, and there's a good chance it doesn't stick around. But our heartbeat at the Orchard is always going to be the why, and the why we do things is going to be what influences us changing things drastically, right? The why is we want to impact lostness. The why is we want to love God and love people. The why is we want something for you and not from you. And if all these things are true, then we're going to find different ways to do that. We're going to find different ways to impact lostness. We're going to find different ways to be for people. We're going to find different ways that we can love our community and love God in the process. And so if you're here for that, if you're here because you want to be a part of a church that's willing to go further and do things because we love people, you'll stick around because you won't get married to a concept. You'll get married to the idea of loving people.
That's right.
If you're here because you love one of those whats for a season, it's probably just going to be a season because we don't get married to much around here. And the what is probably going to change at some point. And the what is just a tool to get us to the why. And so if the tool is constantly changing with culture, then we're going to be doing new things. And so we don't ever want anybody to fall in love with the what. Obviously, we have some strategic things in our DNA that we like, but really and truly, and I think you can speak to this if you want to, Chip, there's not much on the chopping block at any given point with us because we are not married to the idea.
You mean there's not much that's not?
That's not on the chopping block, sorry, because we're not married to the idea that this what is the end-all be-all. The why is what we're going after, and the what is incredibly flexible.
Yeah. What is not on the chopping block is our heart for mission.
Yeah.
And I didn't say missions, that's part of it, but mission. We want to see the lost saved. What's not on the chopping block is that we're going to be a church that loves God by loving people. That's not on the chopping block. What's not on the chopping block is that core foundational theology of the Orchard. The Bible is the Word of God. We've just spent a series talking about that. Jesus is the only Son of God. The only way that we are saved is by grace through faith in Him. Those things, that's not going to change. Our focus on the gospel is not going to change. The fact, hear me out, let's get more specific. The fact that we sing songs and pray and preach the scriptures, that's not going to change. The fact that we have ministries for students and children, that's not going to change. The fact that we focus on small groups, it's not going to change. The fact that we call you to serve, that's not going to change. But the form that all of those things take may well change.
Yeah, I would even say the calendar might change on that. So yeah,
that's right.
Overall, we're going to be preaching. Overall, we're going to be singing. Overall, we're going to be praying. But on the fourth Sunday of the month, we're going to be doing something completely different.
Yeah, don't assume you know what that looks like.
Right, absolutely.
I think the other thing there also, AJ, is that it's not just the what that we do that changes, but it's the who is doing it that changes as well.
Yeah.
And I think that Pastor Eddie at the Orchard has been a living example of that because he was the location pastor in Lake City. And then he did Lake City and Southridge when they were two separate locations. And then he became the location pastor in Live Oak. And now he's our location pastor in Branford. And so Pastor Eddie has left all of our locations at some point.
Yeah.
And it is a good reminder that there have been people who just went to those locations because Pastor Eddie was there. and they didn't stay after he left.
Right.
I mean, it has happened. I'm not going to tell you it hasn't.
Yeah.
But it's not just Pastor Eddie. One day it's going to be me. One day it's going to be you. One day it's going to be your best friend who was attending with you.
Right.
So it just can't be the who either. Like it has to be grounded in the why.
Yeah,
for sure.
I was sitting around a campfire Saturday night, and it was funny to hear this firsthand. We kind of got into some conversations or whatever, and one of the gentlemen sitting around the campfire with me was just like, man, we didn't know what to think about you at first. We didn't know, like who is this redheaded guy that shows up? And really what that did is it showed me that the group of people around this campfire are here for the why. Because when the what changed for a season, they were okay sticking it out. I'm not here for this guy. I'm not here for this church. I'm not here for the situation, or this church staff position, I should say. I'm here because I'm in lockstep with what this church wants to accomplish, and the what's going to change. And it doesn't change where we attend church. It doesn't change the mission of the church. And so it's just a cool moment to see that come to life, I guess. The what's changing, the why's not changing.
That's right.
They're sticking,
That's right.
So that's good, man. So the last week I mentioned this, the last week of the series will be different. And I want to plug this because I want to start to, and I said this Sunday, I want to get this in your brains. And I want to make sure it's in your brains. I want to make sure you hear me. And I know that this is going to be the case for some people, but I don't want it to be the case. And that's why I'm going to unapologetically mention it for the entire series. We are doing something completely different. That is not a reason for you to say, oh, Sunday's different today, I'm not coming. In fact, if there's a week in this sermon series that could have the opportunity to be the biggest piece of the spiritual formation process for you, it could be the last week.
I mean, in fairness, it's going to be the only week that you couldn't catch up online later.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, so
there's that.
Which is sometimes a plausible reason people don't come. Other times it's an excuse, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, we're going to be doing something different. We're going to be going into our communities that Sunday morning, and we're going to be loving on people. We're going to be finding service projects. We're going to be finding ways that we can partner with needs that are in the community. And so it will look completely different. You will show up, and then we will scatter. That it will not be a show up and receive Sunday as much as it will be a show up and bless others Sunday and go out. And so I'm excited about that. Looks like I want to, here's the thing. We are expecting you to still come and to still be a part of. We are expecting you to still come and buy in. And so we have resources and things lined up for you to be able to do that. So do not shy away from that just because it looks different, and be a part of that.
The way that I'm thinking about that, is that there's not going to be a church service, but there will be a church serving.
Yeah.
And that's still church.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's going to be called Impact Sunday. I'm excited about it. Every location has different things in the works. Your LPs, your location pastors are going to keep you guys in the loop with that. But I think it's going to be a really cool Sunday to be out in the community.
Hopefully it's going to be a cool Sunday.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not going to be
praise. Come on, Lord, if you're listening.
I've seen you do it for others, Lord. I need you to do it for me.
We would love a little cold front that day. That's the big thing coming at the end of the month with that. But also want to take a second to plug Harvest Celebration.
Man, I love Harvest Celebration.
Yeah. What a just, I say sweet time and it feels like weird, but it is a sweet time.
It is a little bit weird to say that, but it's fine.
Yeah, it's just a sweet time.
It's only weird if you've never been in church. If you've been in church before, you get it.
Such a sweet time, right?
There's a sweet spirit in the place today.
But it is dope, man. I love it. It's cool. And you get to see a bunch of people. You get to hear stories about what God's doing at the other locations and through the orchard. You get to take communion this year.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk about that for a minute, because that's one thing I don't want people to miss, is that this year we started out going deeper in our understanding of the Lord's Supper, right, and its significance. And so we decided as a church that we were really only going to take the Lord's Supper as one church, because it's the Lord's Supper. In some way, it makes us one church, is what Paul teaches us in 1 Corinthians.
It's unifying.
And so we've done that at our nights of worship this year as one church in one location. And I know there's a lot of people who have missed having it on Sunday morning and being a part on Sunday morning. And we're going back to that next year.
Yeah.
But this Harvest Celebration, November the 17th, is going to be our last opportunity for this year to take the Lord's Supper together.
Yeah. So don't miss it. We want you to be a part of it. Chip just let out the most righteous yawn I've ever seen in my life. Or was that a sneeze?
No, it was a yawn. I was trying to keep it quiet, and it hurt because I was trying to keep it quiet. Like my throat just caught on fire. That's sleep.
Plugging. So Anthony Richardson just got benched last week for tapping out on a third down play. We talked about that.
Yeah.
This week, CBS is the most ruthless Instagram account out there because they don't care about any athlete's feelings.
Wendy's would probably have a word. But
Dude, they'd be running for top spot. This week, Anthony Richardson has one innocent yawn on the sideline, and they videoed it and put it up there on their social media and said, interesting.
Oh, wow. So the video that I saw about Anthony Richardson was the video from several years ago when Matthew Stafford was still playing for the Detroit Lions as quarterback, and he gets absolutely annihilated on a pass play, knocks him to the ground, dislocates his shoulder. They've got the mic up on him, and he can't breathe. He's, and he's like moaning, and they tell him it was pass interference in the end zone. So now the ball's down there, on like the 2-yard line, and he gets up. The medical team comes out, and he's like, no. That was a timeout. It counted as a timeout. It was like a TV timeout. Said, so I could get to stay in. I get to stay in. They said, come out. He said, no. And he runs away from them, takes the snap.
Got that dog in him.
Throws a touchdown and immediately doesn't even celebrate. Like he just goes limp on one side of his arm and he's running off and he goes, it's out. Come on, it's out. And his arm's dislocated, runs off the field. Has to go to the locker room to get it fixed. Doesn't even watch him kick the extra point. And then it immediately cuts to AR tapping on his helmet and saying, I ain't gonna lie to y'all, I did a lot of running play before that and I was tired.
I'm tired, man. That's crazy. Matthew Stafford, dog. I love it.
Dog.
Completely got derailed. The Harvest Celebration, November 17th, 4 p.m. Be there. It's going to be great.
You ready for the connection?
Yeah, tell me.
I'm sure we'll be tossing around the pigskin.
We're going to have a pigskin. We're going to have bounce houses. Hey, listen, I said this Sunday, and I mean this, and I don't know if your location pastor told you this Sunday, but I'm going to say it for him. We're bringing desserts. So we're going to provide food, but we want you to bring the desserts, okay? So potluck-style desserts. If you make a good dessert, bring a lot of it. Like, don't just bring a little bit of it because we're usually serving food and we don't get it to last. And I love a public sugar cookie, but I don't want to eat a public sugar cookie when there's a Oreo mud pie that somebody made that I didn't get to because you only made one little pan. So bring a bunch of it. You know what I mean? That's where I'm at. Bring it. That's going to be one of my cheat days. Let me cheat. Bring a bunch of dessert. All right, there's my 2 cents.
My man is fired up right now.
It's good.
All-time favorite dessert.
Oh, that's tough. It depends on the mood. Are we talking like sweet? Are we talking tart? Are we talking like, what are we?
Dessert.
Yeah, but I mean, there's like cakes that I would love on its own. Then there's
throw one out there. I mean, it's not like we're going to hold you to it.
I don't know, man. Gosh, there's so
Mercy. Chris, all-time favorite dessert.
Ice cream. I can always go down for ice cream.
What a vanilla. Chris's flavor? Vanilla.
It is. I love vanilla ice cream.
Yeah, fair enough. I couldn't pick one. I just love them all. I got the biggest sweet tooth of anybody I know.
Right, you ready for this?
That's why I'm 250 pounds.
Banana pudding.
That's disgusting.
Or cheesecake. Banana pudding cheesecake.
There's my way. Somebody.
My land.
That is a waste of a pick, bro. Like, respectfully, it's like everybody loves a good banana pudding. Nobody's putting that first. Nobody's putting banana pudding first.
Yeah. Be a shame if you weren't getting a paycheck in time to pay for your Christmas vacation. Waste of a pick.
Oh, banana pudding. You could pick any.
Have you ever had Bluebell banana pudding ice cream?
Also, it's pudding.
No.
All right.
I'll put it on the list, though.
Chris, if you're an ice cream guy, we should link this in the show notes. Bluebell banana pudding ice cream. It'll change your life. Not like Jesus, but a distant second.
That low-key sounds, what the kids say, bussin'.
It slaps.
Slaps, yeah. That's good. I think we officially derailed. So bring a dessert. Harvest Celebration, November 17th. Impact Sunday, the last Sunday of the month. It's going to be a really good time. Chip, any parting words? Chris, any parting words?
How about this? One more thing that we're going to throw out there that's coming up. This may be the first you're hearing about it, but word is starting to leak out. So let's confirm it. Jingle Jam is coming back this year in December, but it's come back a whole lot bigger and a whole lot better.
Oh, yeah.
We are going on a 3-city tour. Mm-hmm. We're going to the schools. We're going to be passing out flyers to every elementary age student in the 3-county area.
Boom.
It is going to be phenomenal. You're going to hear more information coming up. Not going to give it all away now. But, AJ, it's immediately what I thought about when you said, as a church growing up, it's time for us to take our next step. We're going to tackle bigger things. We're going to really invest in the region. And so here's what I love, right? In this North Central Florida region, you got to leave it to go to Gainesville to go watch a show. You got to leave it to go to Jacksonville to go watch a concert. You got to leave it to go to Tallahassee to do the Christmas parade. You know where you don't have to leave our region is to see an amazing, interactive Christmas performance big enough for the whole family. Jingle Jam.
Jingle Jam, boy, it's going to be lit. It's going to be a good time. I'm excited about it. I think
it's going to be lit. Was that like a light reference or?
No, yeah, it will be. It will be eliminating.
Wow.
All right. We'll get you guys next week. See you. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk About That. We hope it encouraged and challenged you as we continue to grow in this journey of faith and embrace community. If you have more questions, thoughts, or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us through our social media channels or visit our website and stay connected. Your questions are what make this podcast a dynamic and enriching experience. If you found today's discussion meaningful, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Your engagement helps us spread the message and connect with others who may find value in these conversations. Until next time, we hope this episode inspired you and will help you bring Sunday's message into your week ahead. Keep the conversation alive, and remember, we're all on this journey together.